everybody, welcome and thank you for joining me. For some of you, the material in this video will look familiar because if you had visited my website in the past, you may very well have seen the first part. I think I also reposted the first part of this video on the actual channel in order to advertise my website. But that was a long time ago, okay? And half of you weren't even members yet. However, on my website are two videos. The first one is titled Diana, a Woman Looking for Love, and the second one, Diana and Dodi, A Fatal Romance. Now, I made these two videos years ago, relying somewhat on the information collected over years by John Morgan. Now, John Morgan is from Brisbane, Australia, and is an investigative writer with a diploma in journalism. Not many people actually visit my website, and I myself have not worked on it in a while. So I decided to rework the two videos and load them on the channel as one video. I will, however, leave it in two parts, though, as I believe that the two parts are indeed totally separate. Diana's life before Dodi, and obviously the month or so after she met Dodi. So guys, let's get into it. The sound is going to play tricks on you a little because for obvious reasons I am now recording on a different device. But I hope you enjoy it, and I absolutely 100% recommend the Diana and Dodi, A Fatal Romance. Okay, so I'll see you on the other side of this. Bye for now.
Okay, we are going to start talking about Princess Diana. And I sat through hours of videos rehashing old news stories, etc., etc. I also went and read books that I still had on her, although I read them years ago. I felt the need to actually go through them again and just remind myself of all the finer details. So I did quite a bit of work, but yeah, we need to get this thing going because there's a lot of it. Diana was only 16 when she met Charles, and he was already 29. Diana was also barely 19 years old when the news broke that she was dating Prince Charles, and shortly after, their engagement was announced on the 24th of February 1981. When they got married on the 29th of July 1981, Diana was only 20 years and 19 days old, and Charles already 32. By now, Charles had had a number of relationships and girlfriends, but Diana, not a single serious or long-lasting relationship other than the odd bit of flirting. But as she had come from a rather dysfunctional, chaotic home life and was so young when she met Charles, there was hardly time for her to go through all the dramas of young love. By the time William was born in June 1982, Charles and Diana was married for less than a year, and Diana was not yet 21. Harry was then born on the 15th of September 1984, and by now Diana was only 23, married to a prince who was a man of 35, and had two young children, the eldest being just over 2 years old. Being such a young mother with two young children can be stressful in itself. Can you guys imagine what it's like not only to be that young, not only to have two such young children, but also to be married to a prince, a mature man who is already 35. It is said that Charles rekindled his relationship with Camilla in 1986, even though it was common knowledge that he maintained a friendship with Camilla throughout his marriage to Diana. It is, however, said that Diana's relationship with Captain James Hewitt also began at this time in 1986. In 1992, 11 years after they got married, it is announced that Charles and Diana were separating. By August 1996, Charles and Diana's divorce had been finalized and she was dating Dr. Hasnat Khan. She met Dr. Hasnat Khan in 1995 at the Royal Brompton Hospital, where he was treating her friend and healer, Una Shanley Toffolo's husband. Although Diana was instantly infatuated with Dr. Khan and they started dating before her divorce from Charles was finalized, Diana told a friend that they did not consummate their relationship until after the divorce, as Khan's morals as a Muslim made him draw the line at physical intimacy with a married woman. Regardless of Diana's love and infatuation with Khan, the relationship soon experienced unsolvable difficulties. Khan did not like the sudden limelight. He was also a very private and proud man. Although Diana liked the normality of a life with Khan, even cleaning his flat and ironing his clothes, there was no denying who she was or getting away from the spotlight herself. When Diana offered to buy him a new car, Khan refused. Out of fear of Khan's reaction when the true nature of their relationship leaked to the Sunday Mirror, Diana called up a reporter in the Daily Mail to tell him that the Mirror's story was fabricated. Khan was hurt by Diana's denial, and it created a major rift between the couple. Diana was desperate to hang on to Khan and made inquiries about how they could get married, and this fueled Khan's anger and disapproval of Diana's conduct. At the same time, Khan's father, Dr. Rashid Khan, gave an exclusive interview to the Daily Express in which he said that the family would never approve of a marriage between Diana and their son. Khan was by now tired of all the drama surrounding their relationship, and it ended after an explosive fight between him and Diana. Although Diana came across Dodi A Fatal before at events, it was only on the 14th of July 1997, when she was spending time on his father's yacht, that they had first properly met outside of the social scene. And as we all know, that was the beginning of the end for Diana, as in August 1997, just over a month later, she dies in a car crash, aged only 36 years old. People are equally split when it comes to Diana's death. Some are convinced that it was more than an accident. Others are convinced that it was just that, an accident. My next video will be about the accident, the month before Diana's death, and the time after Diana's death. Now, some of this information is not readily available in the mainstream media, and I also have my own opinions on some of the issues.
Okay, so I cut the original video here because I'm basically only waffling on about the website, etc., etc. So from here, we are now going to go on to the next crucial and deadly part of Diana's story. I truly hope that you will find it interesting and a bit of an eye-opener. Okay, let's listen together.
Princess Diana, A Fatal Romance. Diana and Dodi had run into each other at events, but it was only in July 1997, when she was on holiday with her sons on Dodi's father's yacht, that a spark developed between them. According to popular gossip, Dodi was actually also on vacation with his then girlfriend, a model, when his father called and asked him to return to his father's villa in Saint-Tropez to entertain Diana and her sons. On July the 17th, 1997, Diana was seen in Saint-Tropez. Later it became known that although her sons were there with her, Diana and Dodi grew close over those few days. On July 22nd, Diana joined other celebrities at a memorial service for fashion designer Gianni Versace. On August the 10th, she traveled to Sarajevo to draw attention to the fight against landmines. However, at this point, the tabloids were already full of speculation about her relationship with Dodi. Diana then went on a cruise of the Mediterranean Sea on Dodi's yacht before flying to Paris on Saturday, August the 30th. On August the 31st, after dinner at the Ritz Hotel, Dodi and Diana left the hotel. A chase ensued, whether real or imagined, and a crash followed. Diana, Dodi, and their driver Henri Paul were killed. The bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones survived the crash, but was horribly disfigured. Diana was laid to rest on the 6th of September 1997. So this is the basic timeline of Diana's demise, and now we have to look at the accident, regardless of how horrible it was. Although I will not try to convince you that it was just an accident or that there was more to it, I will prove to you that the reason why there is still to this day speculation about it is because of the royal family's lack of transparency and interfering with the normal course of justice. Diana and Dodi's vehicle left the Ritz at approximately 2:30 a.m. Photographers and journalists were gathered in front of the hotel, and Diana wished to avoid them. Although Diana and Dodi were already ensconced in a suite at the Ritz, for some reason they decided to leave for Dodi's apartment. Henri Paul, who was already off duty, was called to drive them. A ruse was planned, and another vehicle was driven to the front entrance while Diana and Dodi escaped through a back entrance. Photographers soon realized what was happening, and those who noticed soon rushed to their vehicles. Witnesses stated that there were 3 to 4 powerful motorbikes which soon closed in on Diana and Dodi's vehicle. However, after the accident, investigators were soon able to track the journalists and photographers who were gathered at the hotel, and it is notable that only one of them owned a powerful motorcycle. The rest either owned scooters or small cars. Like with many other contested deaths, like that of Jeffrey Epstein, the cameras in the tunnel were out that night, but we'll come back to that later. It was actually a young man on a motorbike who was the first to report the accident. It is alleged that Dodi and the driver were both killed instantly. Dodi was sitting behind the driver, Henri Paul, and the impact was on the driver's side. Diana and Trevor Rees-Jones were on the passenger side of the vehicle, and both survived. Diana was found sitting on the floor of the vehicle. She was talking, her blood pressure was 70 and pulse 100. She scored 14 out of 15 on the AIS scale, which stands for Abbreviated Injury Score, and was thus stable enough to be taken to hospital. Yet, it took the ambulance 1 hour, 43 minutes to get Diana from the scene to a hospital? And why did the ambulance pass two hospitals, which were both closer than the one in which she died? I looked at the location of the hospitals and will put a map on the screen for you so you can see where they actually were. In the ambulance with Diana were two doctors, a driver, and two assistants. Also notable is that one of the doctors actually contacted the base and informed them nothing for thoracic. So when they arrived at the hospital, they did not have a thoracic specialist on hand, and one had to be called at his home where he was already fast asleep. By the time he arrived at the hospital, Diana had already stopped breathing. Although Diana's official time of death was 4 a.m., she actually died at 2:12 a.m. Since Diana's passing, a number of people, investigators, authors, journalists, and private individuals had made it their life's work to look into the accident, and after the 2007-2008 British inquest in particular, many of them had been very vocal about the shoddy investigation, the lackluster inquiry, and the discrepancies between the details given at the inquiry and those contained in witness statements. Firstly, as the accident happened just after 12:30, a number of witnesses had given their statements before dawn. However, none of these statements were read or presented to the jury. Instead, a few witnesses were called to the stand. And remember that this was now 10 years after the accident. John Morgan, author of Paris-London Connection, is of the opinion that out of the witnesses called, few lied outright, and some had bad or unsubstantiated recall of the events, and should there have been genuine interest in uncovering the truth, the original witness statements would have been presented instead. A strong allegation was presented, namely that Henri Paul was drunk. The court was presented with his blood alcohol level, yet with that amount of alcohol in his body, he would have shown clear signs of being drunk. Yet security cameras inside the Ritz show him steady on his feet, smiling and talking to people. After the court hearing, John Morgan looked into the anomaly and found that there were two bodies in the morgue, and as the report on Henri Paul showed very high levels of carbon monoxide, he suggested that the sample presented were taken from the second body. To this day, there is very little certainty of what or how much Henri Paul drank that night. He went off duty at 7 p.m., but was called back to the Ritz and arrived at about 10 p.m. Diana and Dodi were still having dinner, and between 10 and 12 p.m., Henri was seen ordering drinks twice between 10 and midnight at the bar. However, if the alcohol ratio of 1.75 to 1.87 grams were correct, as stated at the inquiry, then Henri should have had to consume an additional 7 glasses of whiskey between 7 and 10 p.m. and would have been drunk already when arriving back at the Ritz. Both Trevor Rees-Jones and another of Dodi's bodyguards, Alexander Wingfield, claimed that Henri appeared sober when he left with Diana and Dodi. Other suggestions which popped up were that he suffered from depression after he broke up with his partner, Laura Pujol, and that he may have taken antidepressants that night, and that the use of the medication along with the alcohol may have impaired him. None of his colleagues, however, knew that he suffered from depression, and none were aware of him taking pills for such a condition. Henri also had a date that evening with a lady identified only as Sylvie L. In 2002, his parents filed a suit in a bid to clear his name. His parents claimed that a normal person would not have been able to stand, let alone drive, with such high levels of alcohol and carbon monoxide. Another key item in the investigation was the white paint found on the crashed vehicle. Police conducted checks on 40,000 cars and questioned 3,000 drivers in what was labeled a fruitless search for a white Fiat Uno rumored to be involved. However, that was not quite true, and the search was not really all that fruitless. Two possible drivers were identified. The first was James Anderson, a French photographer who had previously taken photographs of Diana. It was alleged that James was the driver of a white Fiat Uno which collided with a Mercedes in the tunnel. According to the Paget report, the car could not be traced. However, it did not take John Morgan long to discover that Anderson sold the vehicle 3 months after the accident. Anderson himself died a violent death about 3 years after the accident. He was found with 2 bullet holes in his head and his car completely burned out. However, it was ruled a suicide. I'm going to post a link where you can read more about this. I'm not going to go into the finer details of Anderson's death. The father of a man who was driving a white Fiat Uno on the night Diana was killed had also admitted that his son had the car painted red just hours after the crash. Lavonta was questioned by French detectives in 1997, and forensics showed that the white paint on his car could possibly match the white paint on the Mercedes, but they had to rule him out as there were remains of a rear tail light found on the scene, and Lavonta's tail light had not been replaced recently. Lavonta also told detectives that he worked as a security guard at a factory between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Lord Stevens, however, did not agree with French investigators and was of the opinion that Lavonta should have been looked into more. Bizarrely, in Stevens's report, Lavonta was the only person referred to, but not named. Lord Stevens simply called him the second Uno driver. There are 2 other rather bizarre facts which stood out to me among the hordes of others. The first being the fact that a royal coroner took control of the post-mortem, when in reality Diana was no longer a royal, and Diana's sisters had already informed the royal family that Diana would be buried at Althorpe. According to British law, the coroner for the county in which the deceased will be buried has jurisdiction. The second thing is that Tony Blair had lied about his final conversation with Diana in his book, A Journey. He said that he had warned Diana about Dodi about a month before the crash during a private meeting. It was found that according to Diana's diary, such a meeting did indeed take place on the 6th of July 1997. However, Diana only met Dodi on the 14th or 17th of July 1997. So how could he have warned her about Dodi a week before? Many other allegations were made, such as that Henri Paul worked for MI6, but even though this suggestion was made in almost every article or touched on in almost every book, no one could provide any evidence that this was actually true. However, it is true that Paul was a low-level informant for the police who kept an eye on certain or particular foreign visitors to the Ritz. In John Morgan's books, he puts forth two suggestions for possible motives for Diana being murdered. The first one has to do with her anti-landmine campaign. Diana was very outspoken about the issue and came out strongly against landmines and was trying to destroy the industry. She had been warned against this endeavor, but did not intend to stop. The second suggestion is, of course, that she had become too much trouble for the royal family. Not only was she outspoken about Charles not being suitable as future king, but her relationship with Dodi was the second serious relationship with a Muslim man. And she had taken William, a future king, to a property belonging to Muhammad al-Fayed, who was not popular among the British establishment. Now, everything I have presented here in this video had been proven and debunked hundreds of times over, and I do not profess to have more knowledge than any of the experts, and will thus never even attempt to persuade anyone either way, as I myself am divided on the subject. However, it is my opinion that had the royal family not intervened in the investigation, had the autopsy been performed by an independent coroner, for example, none of the theories or allegations would still have been making the rounds today. Had witness reports made within hours of the crash been presented to the court, more answers would have been answered, and more authentically so. Now that we are faced with Harry and Meghan's behavior, it appears as if the royal family had learned absolutely nothing from Diana's death. By covering up their devious actions, they are again putting themselves in a position where conspiracy theories and wild allegations will flourish. I hope that you have found this video informative. References for this body of work will be displayed on the screen at the end of the video. In the next video on this website, I will look into Charles, his life, his friendship, and his allegiances. Should you wish to comment or add to the information in this video, please email me at bookwormonthecase@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.